mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about Season 1, Episode 3 of FX's The Old Man. These episodes don't have a title, they're just Part 3, but I wanted to talk about this episode right away because there's so much good stuff that happened in this episode. We got two really big reveals, and what I loved about these reveals, it was less about the shock value of the reveals, right? I mean, I figured too, with at least one of them, I probably should have been able to piece it together a little bit sooner. But it's less about the quality of the reveal and more about the implications for the rest of this season. I don't like, and sometimes it gets pulled off, but I don't like shows that just remain mysterious for the entirety of a season, and then you get hit with reveals at the end. I like the idea of giving these reveals early because it creates a whole lot of questions and a whole lot of what's going to happen next that we can be excited to see play out over the remaining, I think it's like an eight episode season maybe, I'm not sure, but let's just say it's 8. Over the remaining 5 episodes, we now have so many questions that we already have that we can be excited to see answered. Whereas keeping you in the dark for say 7 episodes and then finding out stuff at the end, it can work sometimes, but I think this is a much better play that will allow us to come into each subsequent episode a little bit more excited to find out a little bit more information about the things that were revealed this week. So, like I said, we get 2 big pieces of information revealed this week. The first is that Agent Adams is Chase's daughter, Emily. So after Chase tells Zoe to leave because he knows that she's in trouble. Well, actually, she's trying to leave anyway, but he tells her that they need to leave together, and she kicks him out. And she tries to kick him out. And he gets a call from Emily, and Emily wants to talk to her. And Emily gives Zoe this whole story about, hey, look, my dad's not as bad as you think he is. And there's a cool shot. It cuts while she's still talking. Zoe's still listening. And we cut to like an empty parking lot with I think it was like an SUV sitting there. And the camera pans across, and we slowly reveal that Agent Adams is Emily. Now, like I said, I love this reveal because it raises so many interesting questions. So many that I can't even say them off the top of my head. I'm just going to read them directly from my notes because this reveal, there's so much that we need to learn about how this came into play, this dynamic, and then there's so much to learn about how this is going to be played by her going forward. So I'm just going to read some of the questions that I have after we got that reveal, which, by the way, is the one that I had not figured out. Like, I feel like you could figure out the other one, but this one got... Oh, no, I'm sorry, I got it in reverse. I feel like this is the one you could have figured out. I didn't. but yeah, we'll continue. So how invested is Emily in her role with the FBI? And what I mean by that is, how authentic is her relationship with Harper? Is this like a... she's there on Chase's behalf, like she's kind of like infiltrated the FBI on behalf of her father, or is she actually working for Harper, or working with him? Do they have a real relationship? When I mean by a real relationship, I mean her and Harper. Like, again, is this, because I don't know now if Agent Adams / Emily is an actual FBI agent. Well, I mean, she obviously is, but someone who just got into the FBI, or if she was sent there on behalf of Chase to infiltrate. And if she was, and she was sent there to build a relationship with Harper and to infiltrate the FBI, how authentic is this relationship? Like, are they actually kind of almost like a somewhat of a father-daughter relationship? Or is this just an act that Emily is putting on? And if it is real, if she really does have a relationship with him and they really do have a real rapport and it is authentic and she's not there on behalf of Chase, is she playing both sides? And if she is... Do they know? Like, I mean, we obviously know that Harper can't possibly know that that's Emily, but does Chase know that his daughter works for the FBI and has a relationship with Harper? If he does know, well, no, does he know? Because it's interesting if he's completely clueless. Like, if he has no idea that she works for the FBI and that she has this relationship with Harper. That's a question I want to know. She also mentions not having gone to the movies since she went with Harper's son, who we know is dead. What is her relationship with Harper's son? Because we know that Harper's son was married because the wife is dead too. So what is the nature of that relationship? Is it brother or sister, or is it, again, is it real, but she was actually, again, working on Chase's behalf. Like, I want you to get in good with his son, just in case we need some leverage. Like, so many questions about her motivations and what the reality is of her relationships with Harper. Does Chase know about her relationship with Harper? That's enough. Like, again, I kind of touched on that already, but I was just kind of like word vomiting while I was writing out these questions. So many thoughts were entering my mind about what happened, how much knowledge Chase has about what Emily does, and how authentic is Emily's relationship with Harper. So really good stuff. And we don't get to look forward to learning all of that information if we just play coy with the audience for 7 episodes and then reveal like, oh shit, it's Emily at the end. Like, I like the idea of again, assuming there's around about 5 episodes left, I like the idea of having all of these really interesting questions about Emily and Chase and what they know, what they don't know, what their motivations are, all this kind of stuff. I'm looking forward to finding that out over the next 5 episodes. So I think that was a really brilliant strategy. The second thing we learn is that Chase's wife is, well, Hamzad's wife. This reveal shows the motivation for why Hamzad wants Chase, but also why Chase has been on the run all this time. So in one of the flashback scenes, Hamzad essentially tells Chase that Chase can't actually help them unless he can get his wife to believe that Chase is actually there to help. Like, we got to get my wife on board. She arrives and she reveals her face, and we see it's the same woman from the flashback scenes in the cafe who played the young Abby Chase. So we're there at that moment meant to put together like, oh my goodness, he ends up marrying Hamzad's wife? Like, what? And I loved... So side note, actually, I went back and I watched that scene in the cafe again, and it's about midway through episode 1. It's interesting to watch that conversation again with the context of knowing that they probably have just arrived in America after having escaped Hamzad, or not just having arrived, because he did say in that scene that, every time I get this feeling, we move again. So they've probably been around for a while, but him deciding that he wants to settle down with her, that's what happens in that scene. And it gives interesting context when we know who she is and where she came from. So I would say it might be interesting for you guys if you wanted to watch that scene again. And it also adds a little bit of interesting context to an earlier scene with Harper explaining to Waters what happened. So he says something like, what's the phrase he used? She just wanted better access to a Walmart. He dribbled a little Salt Bay racism on that. Like, that felt a little racisty. But that line is interesting. Well, one, when you watch the cafe conversation again, and she's like marveling at 3 pages of pancakes. But that scene was also interesting because I liked, we had already had the Emily reveal. So now when he's saying this stuff and you're seeing Agent Adams in the background, like, she looks like she's almost like cringing at like how he's talking about her mother. So like that's really interesting. He's making her mother sound like a gold digger essentially, and she's just like, okay, let's change the conversation. And she does pivot to a good point of finding out what Hamzad's questions are, which leads to another reveal that Waters is there on behalf of Hamzad, or Hamzad's request. Maybe not Waters specifically, but someone like Waters to dig up information on Chase. Let's see, what else do we have here? The questions that we now have about Chase and Hamzad's wife and how they got to that point. Now, the flashbacks were actually the least interesting aspect of the show to this point. But now the flashbacks have become remarkably more interesting because now we get to wonder again, see over the next 5 episodes potentially, how we get from a place where Chase is being looked at as a dirty American who can't be trusted, who is now providing all these guns he promises and this ability to shoot from 1,000 yards, how we get to let's run away and go to America and you end up being my wife. How do we get there? Again, and these are this is why it's smart to have these reveals earlier in the season, because now there's so many questions that we look forward to having answered, as opposed to just kind of like being blindsided with reveals, which is fine in the moment, but it builds up that anticipation. So now I'm like, okay, I can't wait to see episode 4, because now I want to know the answers. I want to start getting some more of these answers to these questions. Whereas if I don't even know that these questions exist, yeah, I could be watching episode 4 and be like, oh, wow, that was a great reveal. But I like this excitement that it builds up. And we have excitement for the flashback scenes now, which for me were on the weaker side. So again, another brilliant decision to me to have these reveals this early in the season. let's see now. The guy that Harper called last week to essentially find and apprehend Chase, he arrives at Zoe's crib, and right as Zoe's leaving after the aforementioned argument and conversation with Emily, she still says, don't be here when I get back. So she didn't buy this whole thing that Emily said, but she says, don't be here when I get back. She runs off to leave her to do her errands, and before she can even get in the car, she hears like a gunshot and the dogs start barking. And she walks up to the window. We kind of like slowly pan across, which is a nice shot, and then we see Chase and this assassin kind of like fall into the shot, which was nice. They scrap it out, another good kind of hand-to-hand combat scene that this show does so well. And then Zoe releases the dogs, and this gives Chase time to shoot the guy. But we do find out that he is still alive, though. And what I liked most about this aspect of the story is that is the cold open and how that really feeds into this story, because we see this guy who we don't know who he is at the time, and he's having a standard normal guy conversation with his grandmother. It's like, oh, that's sweet conversation, like, I don't know, grandma, answering grandma type questions. We have a woman that comes up to the bus stop. He helps her get her stuff on the bus. Seems like a kind guy. And then he goes to take the phone call, and we again, this is kind of a reveal too. We get the slow reveal that we are now seeing the other side of the phone conversation that Harper had. And we find out, oh, this is the assassin that he was given the number for. Or I don't know if he's an assassin, but at least, well, no, now we do know. I didn't know if he was an assassin at first or if he was just like somebody who's meant to find Chase. But I guess when we see him in this episode, he's clearly there to to do more than just discover him. But, we see that this guy is the guy that's been hired to kill Chase. And I love that because when you juxtapose that with what we had just seen with him and his grandmother and him helping a lady on the bus, it just makes it extra scary to know that no matter how nice a person is that you might see on the street, they could still be a murderer that works for like the CIA or something. So I thought that was a really cool reveal as well. And I'm interested again to see how is this going to play out now that we know this guy is still alive. So not as interesting as the other things that I mentioned, but still something interesting to take into account. And who was the guy that picked him up? Was it just one of his own boys, or is it somebody else in like, I don't know, like an Assassin's League? I don't know. But so I'm gonna wrap this one up. I have a couple more thoughts, questions that I wanted to pose that I think are pretty interesting. And I'm gonna completely undermine that by asking something that is completely uninteresting. Has Amy Brenneman always been that bow-legged? Like when she left and she was like walking down the stairs, I was like, Is she always walk like that? I don't know. I feel like I've been watching Amy Brenneman for decades, and I've never noticed that. Now, here's a big question that I have. I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but it seems like there's constantly like a yellow filter over a lot of the scenes. I think the only time we don't really see it is in the scenes with Zoe and Chase at her house. But like the flashback scenes always have like a yellow kind of filter on them. The scenes in the FBI office always seem to have like this yellow kind of filter on them. And generally, you get that yellow filter when you're looking at like overseas, kind of like these warm climate Middle Eastern countries, just to show that kind of like desert warmth and just that feeling of what it would be like to be in the desert. You'll get that kind of like yellow filter thing. But we see that in the cafe. We see that in the FBI office. And it makes me wonder if there's some connection between all of these places, right? So we see it in the flashbacks, which are in Afghanistan, I think, right? We see in the flashbacks in Afghanistan. That tracks. Hot climate place, deserty. People love to put that yellow filter over those kinds of areas. I get it. Should we possibly be using this yellow filter to make a connection to every party in which we see a yellow filter present? So yellow filter in Afghanistan flashbacks, yellow filter in cafe with Chase and Hamzad's wife, and then yellow filter at the FBI office with Harper, Adams, and Waters, who we also know now is affiliated with Hamzad. So maybe it's less of a climate-based filter or location-based filter, and in this case, more of a person-based filter. Like it's something that's when we see these yellow scenes, we're supposed to think or tie it into Hamzad specifically. So just a thought, but I still would wonder what would be the reasoning behind that? Like, could we use this to like glean future information? Like, if we see someone in a yellow filter that we haven't seen before, can we then deduce that that person is somehow affiliated with Hamzat? So we could test that theory out in these future episodes. But I was just wondering about that because that yellow filter always kind of drives me crazy because it feels like old newspaper and it makes things feel dated to me. It does. I don't think warm Middle Eastern climate and stuff like that. I just think old newspaper. So I'm like, it makes me feel like for instance, in the FBI scenes, it just makes me feel like these scenes are taking place in the 80s. It doesn't make me feel like anything else. It's just like, oh, this is old. This is an old 80s movie I'm watching. So it was interesting to me, and I'd like to know what you guys think in the comments. It was interesting to me when Harper was kind of having, kind of going off on Waters, and he starts saying a lot of the same things that Adams had said to him earlier. And I think that's interesting because it shows a level of control that Adams has over him that she might not even know about. Because she wasn't, I don't think she was, no, she was still in the room for that. But, so she might have learned it in that moment. But the fact that she was able to, you know, say things like, oh, he's the nosiest motherfucker in the CIA, and to have him say that same thing to Waters, it lets her know, and it lets us, the audience, know that she's like a blind spot for him. Like, she has some form of control over him, so Chase could take advantage of that. So that'll be interesting to see if she can kind of manipulate Harper into doing some of the things that she wants or that Chase wants via her ability to manipulate him. And this guy's clearly a strong mind, so that means that he has very much has a blind spot for Agent Adams. So I'm going to wrap this one up. I love this episode. I love the reveals. I love what it's setting up for the future of this season. So really excited to keep covering this show. And I'll see you guys next week for episode 4. Peace.